story of Weyland-Yutani does not begin with a corporation, but with a man. Peter Weyland was born in Mumbai in 1990. His mother was a professor of comparative mythology, trained at Oxford, who filled his childhood with tales of gods, immortals, and humanity's eternal quest for transcendence. His father was a self-taught engineer who taught young Peter to build, experiment, and see machines as puzzles waiting to be solved. From this was born a boy with insatiable curiosity, a talent for invention, and the unshakable conviction that humanity was destined for something greater. By the age of 14, Weyland had already registered a dozen patents in fields ranging from biomedical engineering to robotics. Even as just a teenager, he already displayed the two qualities that would define his empire: boundless ambition and the ability to turn abstract ideas into disruptive technologies. While other kids his age worried about exams, Weyland was designing machines that could transform the future of civilization. On October 11, 2012, Weyland Corporation was founded. The timing was perfect. Humanity was on the brink of ecological and technological collapse, reeling from decades of climate instability, overpopulation, and energy crises. Weyland emerged not just as an entrepreneur but as a savior, armed with inventions that promised a better tomorrow. The company's first major slogan reflected that optimism: a better tomorrow today. The breakthrough that cemented Weyland's rise was the development of atmospheric processors. In 2016, his scientists used these machines to generate synthetic atmospheres over the polar ice caps. The result was revolutionary. The melting slowed, temperatures stabilized, and within a few years, the climate crisis that had plagued Earth for generations was declared virtually solved. The name Weyland became synonymous with progress. Overnight, his company went from a promising startup to the most important private institution on the planet. From there, expansion was relentless. By the early 2020s, Weyland Corp had cured most forms of cancer through the use of genetically modified stem cells. It was also the first company to perfect true artificial intelligence, unveiling in 2025 its first prototype android, David 1. Unlike all other robotic models on the market, David was indistinguishable from a real human in speech, movement, and reasoning. For Weyland, the android was not just a tool. It was a promise. The promise that humanity could create life itself and even transcend its own mortality. In 2023, Peter delivered his most famous speech at a TED Global conference. Standing before a captivated audience, he declared,
"For those of you who know me, you will be aware by now that my ambition is unlimited. You know that I will settle for nothing short of greatness, or I will die trying. For those of you who do not yet know me, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Peter Weyland, and if you'll indulge me, I'd like to change the world."
And change the world he did. Less than a decade later, in 2034, Weyland Corp launched the Hadley-class ships, the first line of spacecraft capable of traveling faster than light. For the first time in history, the stars were within reach, not for governments, but for corporations. Colonization and exploration would no longer be driven by national flags, but by private shareholders. Humanity had entered the era of the megacorporation, and at its center stood Weyland. By the end of the 21st century, his empire encompassed every sector: medicine, robotics, terraforming, military contracts, and even off-world resource extraction. But behind all these triumphs lay Weyland's personal obsession: immortality. The myths of his childhood never left him. Unlike his peers, who pursued wealth or power, Weyland sought nothing less than to conquer death itself. And at one point, he came to believe the answer lay not only in science, but in the secrets of humanity's creators, the engineers. This obsession drove the events of Prometheus. In 2089, archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway discovered ancient star maps pointing to LV-223, a distant moon linked to the engineers. Weyland, now old and frail, secretly funded the expedition. Officially, it was presented as a scientific mission. Privately, it was his final desperate attempt to confront the gods and demand the gift of eternal life. He hid aboard the USCSS Prometheus, remaining in cross-sleep, awakening only when the ship reached its destination in 2093. What Weyland found was not salvation, but horror. The ancient temple of the engineers guarded the black pathogen, a substance capable of rewriting life at the molecular level. Instead of granting eternal life, the engineers offered only death. In its final moments, Weyland demanded the gift of immortality, but was struck down by a newly awakened engineer. His dream of immortality had ended, leaving his corporation vulnerable. After the Prometheus disaster, Weyland Corp entered a period of instability. Now without its founder, the company struggled to stay on course. Its secrets, particularly the classified discoveries of LV-223, remained hidden in locked archives, but its rivals sensed weakness. That was when the Yutani Corporation emerged. Based in Japan, Yutani specialized in communications, cybernetics, and artificial intelligence. Unlike Weyland's ostentatious and theatrical leadership, Yutani operated in a more modest but effective manner, excelling in data control, synthetics, and corporate espionage. By the end of the 21st century, Yutani had positioned itself as the second most powerful corporation on Earth, with its sights firmly set on Weyland's assets. The clash between these two titanic corporations did not end in stalemate, but in conquest. In 2099, Yutani launched a hostile takeover, absorbing Weyland Corp in what became the largest recorded merger in history. The new entity was named the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. British by heritage, Japanese by discipline, and absolutely ruthless by design, Weyland-Yutani had been born. Corporate propaganda soon followed. The company launched its new slogan, "Building Better Worlds." Bright posters showed smiling colonists under blue skies, while its recruiters promised adventure and opportunity among the stars. But beneath the advertising facade beat the same obsession that had defined Peter Weyland's life: the pursuit of knowledge and power at any cost. At the dawn of the 22nd century, Weyland-Yutani owned colonies, fleets, armies, and entire industries. It controlled not only the technology sustaining human expansion, but also the people living under its dominion. Employees signed lifetime contracts. Colonists became tenants on worlds owned by the corporation. To work for Weyland-Yutani was to be property of the company itself. What had begun as the dream of a single man had become the most powerful and feared institution of humanity. And although Peter Weyland was dead, his legacy still endured. His obsession with conquering death and seizing the secrets of alien biology still permeated the essence of the corporation that still bore his name. At this point, the era of Weyland-Yutani had begun. The newly merged Weyland-Yutani Corporation had become the heart of humanity's progress into deep space. With its immense wealth, innovative technologies, and near-total monopoly over colonization contracts, the company effectively dictated where, when, and how humanity would expand across the galaxy. Colonies were no longer the result of brave explorers, but of calculations made in boardrooms. Every new settlement, every terraforming mission, every ship launched bore the discrete emblem of the company. Colonization was presented as humanity's next great adventure. However, behind this optimistic facade, Weyland-Yutani viewed the colonies as laboratories, investments, and above all, opportunities to secure resources and biological discoveries that would keep the company ahead of its rivals. The events of Alien³ provide a glimpse of these intentions. In 2104, Weyland-Yutani launched one of its most ambitious undertakings to date, the USCSS Covenant, a massive colonization ship carrying over 2,000 colonists and 1,000 embryos in cryogenic preservation, bound for the distant world of Origay-6. For the colonists, it was a journey of hope, the chance to build a new life far from Earth's overcrowded cities. For the company, it was a calculated business opportunity. Its sole intent was to secure another world under its ownership, exploit its resources, and ensure generations of loyal workers bound by oppressive contracts. But the mission took a catastrophic turn when an unknown signal diverted the ship to an apparently habitable planet, later identified as Planet 4, the supposed homeworld of the engineers. There, the crew encountered David, the synthetic survivor of the ill-fated Prometheus mission. And, like their predecessors, what they found was pure horror. David had used the engineers' black pathogen to exterminate much of the planet's fauna, as well as to conduct genetic experiments on Elizabeth Shaw. The native ecosystem had been transformed, giving rise to grotesque, highly hostile predators. And after countless trials, David created the first recognizable versions of the Xenomorph. These creatures, born of his twisted philosophy, were the fusion of the engineer's biotechnology and his own obsession with what he perceived as perfection. By the film's end, the Covenant had been hijacked. David, posing as Walter, returned the remaining crew to hypersleep and smuggled facehugger embryos aboard. At this point, his personal obsession with creating the perfect organism had converged with the ambitions of the company. Although Weyland-Yutani had not ordered the detour to Planet 4, the fate of the Covenant revealed a chilling possibility. If the company ever recovered David's research or creations, the Xenomorph would become its most valuable asset. Only 18 years later, in Alien, we see Weyland-Yutani's true agenda fully exposed. By 2122, the company had become an interstellar empire, managing vast mining operations with dozens of ships and worlds. The USCSS Nostromo was one of those ships, a commercial tug contracted to haul a refinery and 20 million tons of ore back to Earth. For its small crew of 7, it was simply another job, a paycheck earned in the service of the company. But Weyland-Yutani, as always, had other plans. When the Nostromo passed near the moon Acheron, also known as LV-426, its onboard AI, known as Mother, intercepted a transmission of non-human origin. What the crew didn't know was that corporate command had already determined that the signal was not a distress call, but a warning tied to the dangerous alien organism preserved on that world. Following company orders, Mother diverted the Nostromo to investigate. The crew awoke from hypersleep, believing that they were bound by standard corporate policy to respond to emergencies. In reality, they were mere pawns in its plans. When Executive Officer Kane was attacked by a facehugger inside the engineer's ship, the company's directive immediately came into play, encoded in Special Order 937. Priority 1. Ensure the return of the organism for analysis. All other considerations are secondary. Crew expendable. The ship's science officer, Ash, was revealed to be an undercover synthetic programmed by Weyland-Yutani to enforce that order. Coldly fascinated by the alien, Ash uttered one of the saga's most iconic lines.
I admire its purity. A survivor. Unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality.
This chilling statement perfectly encapsulated the company's philosophy. To Weyland-Yutani, the Xenomorph was not a monster, but a reflection of its own ambitions. A supreme survivor, stripped of weakness, relentless in its adaptability. The cost, of course, was human life. The Nostromo's crew was sacrificed as disposable assets, their lives secondary to the company's dream of weaponizing alien biology and maintaining its hegemony. Only Ripley survived, destroying the ship in a desperate attempt to kill the Xenomorph and deny the company its prized asset. But this did not stop them. 2 decades later, the company's macabre experiments on the Xenomorph are once again revealed in Alien Romulus, set in the early 2140s, between the events of Alien and Aliens. By this point, Weyland-Yutani had expanded its reach even further, embedding itself not only in colonization, but also encompassing nearly everything related to genetic research. The central focus of Romulus is the Renaissance Station, a secret Weyland-Yutani facility where the company had begun experimenting on xenomorphs. Their biology still contains traces of the engineer's black pathogen, and the corporation's scientists believed this mutagenic material could be harnessed to rewrite human DNA itself and improve them. Their justification was simple. Humanity was too fragile to survive the harsh environments of deep space, and by integrating traits of the xenomorphs such as resilience and adaptability, the company believed it could design a stronger, more durable workforce. To oversee these experiments, Weyland-Yutani deployed another synthetic, this time called Rook. Unlike David or Andy, he was an android entirely loyal to the company and its interests. His presence, like Ash's before him, underscored the company's reliance on artificial operatives to enforce its will and keep its employees in line. But, as is customary in the franchise, every attempt to control the alien always ends in disaster. The station was completely overrun, the experiments spiraled out of control, and once again, Weyland-Yutani employees were treated as expendable assets, mere collateral damage in the endless pursuit to unravel the biology of these creatures. By the late 22nd century, Weyland-Yutani had become more than just a corporation. It was an empire in everything but name. Its fleets transported minerals from distant worlds. Its atmospheric processors transformed barren moons into habitable colonies. And its contracts bound not only employees, but entire families to its service. Wherever humans settled, the company's logo followed. The company's motto, "Building Better Worlds," was no longer just a slogan. It was a tool of indoctrination. For every world that thrived under Weyland-Yutani's wing, another was stripped of resources or used as a testing ground for dangerous experiments. By 2179, the corporation owned so much of humanity's infrastructure that the distinction between government and Weyland-Yutani had virtually disappeared. One of the most revealing examples of this empire was Hadley's Hope, a colony established on LV-426 in 2157. Officially co-financed by Weyland-Yutani in partnership with the Extrasolar Colonization Administration, Hadley's Hope was promoted as a model frontier outpost. It housed 158 residents, men, women, and children, working as terraforming engineers, miners, and support staff. Families signed long-term contracts that, in effect, bound them to generations of service for the company. Life at Hadley's Hope was hard, but routine. Terraforming was a slow, laborious process. Colonists lived in prefabricated steel modules, working shifts to operate the massive atmospheric processors that gradually converted LV-426's toxic atmosphere into breathable air. The company provided food, education, entertainment, and housing, but all at a cost deducted from their wages. Colonists joked that they were tenants of Weyland-Yutani, renting their very lives from the corporation that owned them, an image in stark contrast to all corporate propaganda. And to make matters worse, children in the colony's education center were taught to see Weyland-Yutani as the provider of their future. Behind the scenes, the company viewed Hadley's Hope not as a community, but as an investment. That investment turned into a liability when Ellen Ripley was rescued after 57 years in hypersleep. During her debriefings with Weyland-Yutani executives, she described the Nostromo incident, warning of the deadly creature and the engineer's ship they had found on LV-426. The company's response, however, was entirely predictable. Ripley's testimony was dismissed, her credibility attacked, and her flight license revoked due to the costly destruction of the Nostromo. Officially, Weyland-Yutani had no knowledge of alien life. Unofficially, Ripley had handed them exactly the information they needed. The disaster that followed was not orchestrated by high-level executives, but by one man, Carter Burke, a young Weyland-Yutani representative. Burke was nothing more than another ambitious corporate climber. Educated, charming, and seemingly sympathetic to Ripley's situation, he was, in reality, a manipulator who saw an opportunity in her story. Acting on her testimony, Burke secretly ordered Hadley's Hope to investigate the coordinates of the derelict ship, an action that doomed the colony. When contact with Hadley's Hope was lost, the company organized a joint mission with the colonial Marines. Burke joined the expedition under the pretense of oversight. In truth, his agenda was simple: secure xenomorph specimens at any cost. Once the Marines, Ripley, and Burke arrived on LV-426, the truth of everything Ripley had warned about became undeniable. The colony had been overrun, its families slaughtered or captured and taken to the hive. Burke, however, did not stop. He attempted to smuggle face-huggers aboard by exposing Ripley and the young survivor, Newt, to the creatures. His plan was to dispose of the other survivors, faking their deaths as accidents while delivering the embryos to Weyland-Yutani's bioweapons division. When confronted, Burke revealed his plans and true motives. To him, the xenomorph was not a horror, but a source of profit and a quick path to climb the corporate ladder. It was clear that for him, and for Weyland-Yutani, human lives were expendable, but information, especially in the form of alien biological weapons, was priceless. In the end, Burke's greed was what doomed him. Trapped inside the collapsing colony, cornered and killed by the very creatures he sought to exploit. However, while in the original film, he is simply seen being attacked by an alien as he tries to escape, In a deleted scene from the director's cut, Ripley later finds him in the hive, already impregnated by a facehugger. He begs her for help, and she only gives him a grenade so he can help himself. His death was poetic justice, but we all know the greater villain remained without suffering any real consequences. To the public eye, Weyland-Yutani disavowed his actions and pretended Burke had acted alone, continuing their pursuit of the creatures. The battle at Hadley's Hope culminated in Ripley's famous decision to detonate a nuclear device in the atmospheric processor facilities with the support of the surviving Marines, destroying not only the hive, but the entire colony. Hadley's Hope was erased in nuclear fire, but Weyland-Yutani was not. Even as Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and the damaged android Bishop escaped aboard the Sulaco, the company's hunger for acquiring the Xenomorph endured, and the stage was set for the final confrontation. Alien³ unfortunately, begins with tragedy. The Sulaco's escape pod crashes on Fiorina 161, a grim penal colony run by Weyland-Yutani. Once a massive lead foundry, it had been converted into a labor prison for violent criminals. By the time Ripley arrived, only a small group of inmates and maintenance staff remained, living under the company's distant yet present control. Unbeknownst to Ripley, after the Hadley's Hope incident, the Sulaco had brought with it a stowaway, a royal facehugger that had impregnated her during hypersleep and caused a fire that resulted in the crash. The same facehugger later impregnated an ox or a dog, depending on the version. Soon, a new xenomorph, nicknamed the Dragon by the prisoners, was unleashed within the colony. For Weyland-Yutani, this was the ultimate prize, a living queen incubating inside the sole survivor of the Nostromo and Hadley's Hope. When the company learned of the situation, it moved quickly. Orders were given to preserve Ripley until a retrieval team could arrive. The prisoners of Fury, as always expendable, were abandoned to their fate. The aliens slaughtered them one by one, while Ripley came to terms with the harsh reality of her condition. The film's climax brought Weyland-Yutani directly into the open. A heavily armed commando team arrived, led by a man calling himself Michael Bishop, nearly identical to the android Bishop from Aliens. Claiming to be the human designer of the Bishop series, he assured Ripley he was there to help. He begged her to trust him, promising that the embryo could be surgically removed and destroyed. But Ripley saw through the lies when Bishop's calm facade cracked, as he urged her to think of all we could learn from it. The company had no intention of destroying the Queen. They planned to use her for experiments and later as a weapon. In the final moment, Ripley made her choice and threw herself into the smelting furnace as the embryo within her chest began to emerge. Her sacrifice denied Weyland-Yutani the prize it had so long desired and pursued for nearly a century. The Fury 161 incident was the company's last true attempt, at least in the canonical films, to capture the alien. For decades it had manipulated colonists, deceived crews, and sacrificed countless human lives in its quest for the xenomorph. Ripley's final act destroyed not only the embryo, but also the company's hopes of ever controlling the alien. For Weyland-Yutani, the failure at Fury 161 marked the collapse of that century-long pursuit. But for humanity, it was only a fleeting respite. The company's shadow would endure, its archives and ambitions waiting silently for the next opportunity. The era of corporate greed had claimed colonies, crews, and countless lives. And still, Weyland-Yutani had learned nothing and remained the same. Humanity was expendable. Their ambitions took priority. By this point, and for more than 2 centuries, Weyland-Yutani had dominated humanity's expansion into the stars. It had survived disasters, cover-ups, and catastrophic failures in its pursuit of the alien, always recovering with more lies, more cover-ups, and more technicalities. However, by the 2290s, Weyland-Yutani began facing serious financial and political pressures. Its colony at New Indy successfully sued for independence, effectively removing itself from the company's influence. 2 years later, the company lost to rival conglomerate Ripley on a contract to supply the United Systems military, colloquially known as USM, with FTL drives, engines that allowed ships to travel faster than light, severely impacting its financial performance. Finally, in 2349, megacorporations like Weyland-Yutani were outlawed altogether. The company appealed, but after 3 years of litigation, the ban was upheld. and Weyland-Yutani was formally dissolved. In Alien Resurrection, set in 2381, Weyland-Yutani no longer exists. Dr. Wren, one of the scientists aboard the USM Auriga, explains that the company had gone under decades ago and was bought out by Walmart. With all its history of terraforming worlds and building androids, it is ironic that Weyland-Yutani did not fall in some epic fashion, but with the banality of a bankruptcy. The power vacuum left by Weyland-Yutani did not end humanity's obsession with the xenomorph. Instead, it shifted to governments, and though the company had been officially erased, its legacy survived through data archives scattered across the galaxy. In the expanded lore, much of this information was secretly acquired by the United Systems military, forming the foundation of its own experiments. Schematics for terraforming equipment, notes on android design, and, most importantly, all the classified files from LV-223, LV-426, and everything recovered from Renaissance Station continued to exist long after the collapse. In Alien Resurrection, the USM's Science Division oversaw Project Resurrection aboard the Auriga. Using all this, they cloned Ellen Ripley from blood samples recovered on Fury 161. Their goal was to resurrect the queen embryo inside her and exploit it for weapons development. The similarities to Weyland-Yutani were obvious. Where the company had used contracts and propaganda, the USM used patriotism and the military necessity of protecting its citizens. But their arrogance and hubris were the same. The cloned Ripley saw through it quickly, and once again the scientists lost control of the Xenomorphs. With chaos unleashed aboard and the Auriga's artificial intelligence following protocols ordering its automatic return to Earth, the risk of bringing the creatures to the planet was imminent. It was then that Annalee Call, a member of the smuggler ship Betty, infiltrated into the project, took control of the system and reprogrammed the Auriga to deliberately crash into Earth, sacrificing the ship to eradicate the Xenomorphs. The impact had catastrophic and far-reaching consequences. The Auriga exploded over an uninhabited region of Africa, causing damage valued at over $300 trillion. After the disaster, the USM covered up the truth about the xenomorph experiments, publicly attributing the destruction to a supposed terrorist attack. However, the magnitude of the incident and the growing social unrest undermined confidence in the organization until it was left irreparably weakened. Over time, this loss of credibility led to the collapse of the USM as humanity's primary governing power. In the void left by its fall, corporations that had once been suppressed resurfaced with strength, led by a reborn Weyland-Yutani, which regained its influence and reshaped human civilization according to its own interests. Extended universe accounts suggest that the Auriga's impact nearly triggered a new ice age, leaving Earth on the brink of environmental collapse. Recovery was only possible thanks to massive terraforming efforts, reportedly led by those same corporations that profited from the tragedy. Although set before the Nostromo incident, the new Alien Earth series offers fresh perspective on Weyland-Yutani's place in the early 22nd century. The year is 2120, just 2 years before Ripley's crew would encounter LV-426, and humanity is already firmly under the control of megacorporations. At this point, Weyland-Yutani was not alone, but one of 5 corporate giants competing for dominance: Weyland-Yutani, Prodigy, Lynch, Dynamic, and Threshold. Each controlled vast areas of industry, technology, and even civilian life. Earth governments had been reduced to near irrelevance, eclipsed by these new corporate empires. The series introduces Prodigy City, a futuristic metropolis owned and operated by the Prodigy Corporation. Unlike Weyland-Yutani's utilitarian approach to colonization, Prodigy specialized in cutting-edge genetic research and consciousness transfer, even food production. Its laboratories developed synths, humanoid androids infused with fragments of human consciousness, and even hybrids, practically blurring the line between man and machine. To the public, Prodigy represented progress and innovation. To Weyland-Yutani, it was a rival, one threatening to surpass them in the race for supremacy. Into this fragile balance comes disaster. The Weyland-Yutani research vessel, the USCSS Maginot, crashes within Prodigy City's borders. On board were extraterrestrial specimens, including hobomorphs and an adult drone xenomorph. The accident unleashed chaos. Whether it was an accident, sabotage, or a deliberate attempt to prevent the specimens from reaching Earth remains unclear. but the implications are enormous. For Weyland-Yutani, the incident risked exposing long-buried secrets. Possession of alien life had already been the company's most classified pursuit. Now, with the Maginot's wreckage spelling its contents into Prodigy's domain, the xenomorph threat no longer belongs solely to Weyland-Yutani. The possibility that competitors could study it, weaponize it, or turn it against them was alarming. Among the key figures introduced in this new series is Wendy, the first known human-synthetic hybrid. She leads the team investigating the Maginot crash. Wendy represents the culmination of Prodigy's research, a direct challenge to Weyland-Yutani's supremacy in the field of synthetic life, where the company relied on androids like Ash, Bishop, or Rook. Prodigy had taken a different path, creating a being that fuses human consciousness with the resilience and capability of a machine. The Maginot disaster serves as the catalyst for this new conflict, but this time on an unprecedented scale. For the first time, Weyland-Yutani's monopoly on the control and discovery of alien life is under threat. While the films form the central pillar of Weyland-Yutani's story, the company's presence extends far beyond the big screen. In comics, video games, books, and crossovers, it remains the omnipresent shadow, always scheming to capture and weaponize the alien. Additionally, in the Predator films and their spin-offs, Weyland-Yutani becomes the bridge between two of science fiction's most iconic franchises. In Alien vs. Predator, Charles Bishop Weyland leads an Antarctic expedition where he discovers ancient Predator technology and faces the Xenomorphs trapped there. In Alien vs. Predator Requiem, Ms. Yutani acquires a Predator weapon, directly referencing the corporate empire that would one day dominate space. The company's influence is just as insidious in the Alien video games. For example, in Alien Isolation, the corporation is responsible for sabotaging the Sevastopol station by reprogramming the working Joe synthetics to cover up the xenomorph outbreak. Alien's Colonial Marines expands on this, revealing secret company facilities on LV-426, where experiments continued even after the destruction of Hadley's Hope. And in Alien's Fireteam Elite, players uncover Weyland-Yutani black sites on LV-895, where its AI, Cynthia, oversees experiments with the black pathogen. The comics delve even deeper. Alien's Outbreak, Defiance, and Resistance show Weyland-Yutani deploying Black Ops teams, androids, and mercenaries to capture xenomorph specimens. The pattern is always the same: corporate obsession outweighs human cost. Even Blade Runner has been subtly connected, with files hinting at shared corporate networks between Tyrell and Weyland-Yutani. Both corporations embody humanity's arrogance in playing God with artificial life, further reinforcing the company's image in dystopian futures. And with that, we come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, remember to give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell to stay up to date with my new videos. See you in the next one. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed this video, I've got another one I think you'll love. Check it out.